The word today is jurisdiction. It's an important word in the administration of justice. It's a fascinating word in many ways, a fascinating concept. For instance, if an event transpires in the open sea, who has jurisdiction? If satellites crash in outer space, who has jurisdiction? If an idea emerges deep in your heart, who has jurisdiction there? I'm Gorman Houston, the author of The Anatomy of a Disciple. Let's talk about it. Today, in our study of the anatomy of a disciple, we're considering the warmed heart, and we're looking at the issue of jurisdiction. You may know that jurisdiction is a legal term which means power or authority or control. It usually refers to the territory over which authority is exercised. When a crime is committed, for instance, one of the very first aspects of the investigation is to determine which law enforcement agency has jurisdiction. Who has authority? Often jurisdiction is determined by geography, the physical location where the crime occurred. However, sometimes jurisdiction is determined by the type of crime committed. Our interest in jurisdiction in the anatomy of a disciple centers on the question of who has authority over your heart. Do you? Or are you overruled by your basic human nature, your natural instincts, your base desires? When it comes to the matter of a warmed heart, we actually need to begin again by looking at the concept of salvation. Just as we stated last week, all humans are hardwired with a basic self-interest, a human nature that is focused on getting our own way and pursuing our own pleasure. It seems we have almost an unquenchable desire to please ourselves. This human nature forms our base desires and leads us into all manner of problems. Remember, it is not just that some people are good and some people are bad. It is rather that we are all human, and all of us are subject to the passions of human nature. Jesus Christ tells us that our human nature is corrupt in its self-focused orientation. We read in the Gospels Jesus' words, "It is what comes out of a person that defiles, for it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come, fornications, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these evil things come from within, and that is what defiles a person." The Apostle Paul affirmed Jesus' teaching that human nature is sinful nature and produces all kind of harmful actions. He offers a similar list in Galatians chapter 5. I like the way Eugene Peterson puts it in The Message. It is obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex, a stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage, frenzied, joyless grabs for happiness, trinket gods, magic show religion, paranoid loneliness, cutthroat competition, all-consuming yet never satisfied wants, a brutal temper, an impotence to love or to be loved, divided homes and divided lives, small-minded and lopsided pursuits, the vicious habit of depersonalizing everyone into a rival, uncontrolled and uncontrollable addictions, ugly parodies of community, and I could go on. If our sin, our bitterness, our anger, our wickedness is a part of our basic human nature, and evil comes from within our heart, then the question emerges, how can we possibly change? One approach is to create laws, legal codes, and moral codes and the like. The problem is, The law has no jurisdiction over the heart. The law only has jurisdiction over our behavior. If we act on our anger and act on our wild lusts and act on our uncontrollable addictions by committing some act which is immoral or illegal, then the law does have jurisdiction, and it can offer condemnation. The law, you see, is designed not to eliminate sin, but to control sin, to manage sin, to curb our harmful behavior, and to punish it or try to prevent it, or at least try to limit its damage. But the law cannot solve our sin problem. The law cannot change our heart. The law has no jurisdiction over our heart. And Jesus told us that simply changing our behavior is not what He's interested in, not for His disciples. Do you remember His words in Matthew chapter 5? You have heard that it was said by those of ancient times, you shall not murder. But I say to you that if you're angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to the judgment. Or again, we read Jesus' words in the same chapter, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at another with lust has already committed adultery in the heart. And the third time we read in the same chapter Jesus' words, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. Jesus is not just calling His disciples to a change of behavior. He is calling for a change of heart, a warmed heart, a heart filled with His Holy Spirit. You see, the heart is the jurisdiction of the Holy Spirit. For the Holy Spirit purifies the heart like a refiner's fire and fills the heart with an intense, all-consuming love for God and love for neighbor. And the Holy Spirit replaces the heart's harmful, selfish desires with the Spirit's perfect desires. Paul writes that once the Holy Spirit enters your heart, you will begin being guided by a whole new operating system. Where the Spirit is planted, fruit will be born. And what an amazing harvest it is. The fruit of the Spirit, Paul writes, is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And Paul goes on to write, there is no law against such things. That is, the law has no jurisdiction over these matters. My friends, Jesus' invitation is for you to have a warmed heart, to warm your cold heart, to fill it with the Holy Spirit. He wants to give you a whole new operating system in which your desires are not merely tamed, but purified, and your motives are good and godly. Paul offers this counsel: live freely, animated and motivated by God's Spirit. That is, accept the freedom Jesus Christ offers from the domination of your sinful human nature. Invite Him to send His Holy Spirit to fill your life, to purify your motives, and to set you free so that you can live freely and fully under God's jurisdiction with a warmed heart.